Nathaniel is an incredible ham and an ionospheric physicist, a professor, all that good stuff. But in addition to that, he's a great guy. So I'm going to turn it over to Nathaniel, and he's going to fill you in on value of ham radio and his life and career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chip. And let me adjust this here for a second. And thank you for everyone for having me. So yeah, I'm Nathaniel, W2NAF, and I started HamSCI, the Ham Radio Science Citizen Investigation. And so this is a group that allows university researchers to collaborate with the amateur radio community in scientific investigations. And it's really neat today because we really are having the amateur community work with the professionals in a way that I think is really, really doing something in the world. And it really speaks back to the original amateur radio mission. So amateur radio operators have actually been doing this right from the beginning, 100 years ago. But it's nice. I really feel like I've had a chance to formalize it once again, reinvigorate that, bring it back. So I'll talk about my story a little bit. I wasn't sure if I was going to show this, but I think I will. I'll just put my biography up here really quickly so you get a timeline of the whole thing. And you can see my whole talk really quickly. I'm going to my backup slides first. So there we go. Okay. So yeah. So actually, I got my start in ham radio really back. It says I was first licensed back in 1998, which that is when I was first licensed. But I first found out about ham radio back probably in 4 years earlier than that, maybe 1994, 1995, when I was in middle school. And at that point, I just wasn't. I wasn't ready to actually get my license yet. It took me a few years to actually get my license. But I've been licensed since 1998, so I actually qualified for QCWA this year. I became an Eagle Scout. I got my bachelor's in physics and music education, a master's in electrical engineering from Virginia Tech in 2011, started HamSCI in 2015, got my PhD in 2016. I worked at NJIT as a postdoc and a research professor in 2016, and now I'm a professor of physics and engineering at the University of Scranton. So that gives a little background as to where I am. So now that you know that, I'll tell you the story. So yeah, it's this building right here. It's the old guard cabin in Camp Glen Gray. That's where I first found out about ham radio. And I was probably in 7th or 8th grade, and I was on a Boy Scout trip, and it was a cold, wet, rainy weekend. And I remember that it was supposed to be like a woodsman sort of weekend where you're supposed to be like chopping trees and stuff, but that didn't interest me so much. But I stumbled my way into this cabin, and Greg Mikowski, N2BSA, had a little Kenwood TS430S set up, and he had a dipole strung up in the trees. I just heard the crackle of the static on HF, and I heard him talking to all of this DX. And it's so funny because that weekend, I never actually got to make one contact myself, but I was just so captured by all of this. I was like, I want to do this. And it really took me a few years later before I actually, finally got my license. I was at the National Scout Jamboree in 1997. There was an opportunity to take my license there. I hadn't studied, so I found a troop from Ohio. They gave me a book. I studied for like 4 days in the rain. I passed the novice portion of my license, and then but I didn't get the technician. So it was a little bit of a struggle at first. I waited 1 year with my novice CSCE before I finally actually got through and studied and got the technician license and finally passed it. And then that just, things took off. So from there, I was interested in ham radio in high school, and then I had a bit of a struggle when I was leaving high school. Do I go for music education or electrical engineering? I actually ended up picking music education, so that's why you see this picture of me with the French horn there. I eventually got my music education degree. But even through college while I was doing that, I was still drawn to ham radio. And I spent my summers working at Forestburg Scout Reservation Pier, where I basically had the same job when I was in college in my summers as I do now. It's just now the budgets are a little bit bigger and people get degrees instead of merit badges. But other than that, it was basically the same job. I taught people ham radio. I taught people physics and electrical engineering at a certain level, and I just loved it. And that eventually led me to say, okay, I really do want to pursue the engineering rather than the music side of things for a career. And I added a physics degree while I was at Montclair State, so I actually got both my undergraduate degree in both physics and music education, and I decided to pursue a PhD in electrical engineering. I only applied to 2 schools for my electrical engineering PhD degree. One was Caltech, which I had really no chance of getting into, and the other was Virginia Tech. And for some reason, Virginia Tech accepted me. Now, the reason I picked Virginia Tech is actually really interesting because I had 2 criteria for going to graduate school. One is maybe 3 criteria. 1, they had to have a PhD in electrical engineering. 2, they had to have an already active ham radio club. And 3, I wanted them to be kind of outdoorsy. So that's, I came to this date in Hamvention back in, say, like early 2000s. And I met a whole bunch of students from Virginia Tech, including Kenny Lewis and a number of other people from the Virginia Tech Club, and I found out they had a PhD in electrical engineering program, so I'm like, great, I'm going there, it's perfect. So Virginia Tech actually accepted me. I spent time in their club there, and then I ended up working in their Super Darn radar laboratory, which didn't exist when I first got there. When a year after I got there, the Super Darn lab showed up. They said, we study the ionosphere using HF radar. I said, that sounds great. They funded me, and that was my first exposure to really professional ionospheric physics. A large part of why they hired me right away was because I had a ham radio license and I was interested in HF radio. They were new to campus, they needed students. I had HF radio experience. It all worked out. How did HamSCI come about? Well, I think this was probably one of the most important trips for HamSCI. This was back in 2013, 2014. We needed to build a Super Darn radar over in Adak Island, and I volunteered to go and help be on that crew. I didn't do anything technical. I was just grunt labor. I dug trenches, things like that. But it turned out that there were other hams on that same trip. And one of them was Ethan Miller, K8GU, who's here at Hamvention, and he introduced me to the Reverse Beacon Network, which I was then able to say, oh, I bet we can use that data to actually do some real science. So I pulled that data down, and we were able to actually show the effects of a solar flare in there, and I actually got that published. So once I got that done, I was going around Virginia Tech, and then I learned about the 2017 solar eclipse. And I learned that from a poster that Magda Moses, KM4EGE, was doing. She was studying the solar eclipse in the ionosphere. I said, I bet we can use ham radio to do that. And so then we ran around the Dayton Hamvention back in 2015 and 2016, created HamSCI and the Solar Eclipse QSO party, and we eventually got that on the air. We got those results published in a peer-reviewed journal, Geophysical Research Letters. So here's the 2017 total solar eclipse results, the observations and model using the RBN data. We were also able to publish similar results on solar flares and geomagnetic storms using ham radio data, and just last year on large-scale traveling atmospheric disturbances. And I think these publications were really, really important for the success of HamSCI, because I think amateur radio operators, we all have this sense of like, oh yeah, we know the ionosphere, we know, we have a lot of experience with this, but trying to get the professional community to recognize the value is really tough. And the way you do that is you do these publications. And a lot of these publications, came up with results that weren't really surprises to me, but they really laid it out beautifully. And, now we have quite a bit of respect from the professional community. And that's just laid everything out really well. Another thing I really love about the HamSCI community is the community aspect. we now have these HamSCI workshops. We just had one in Scranton about a month ago. We had 150 people show up in person, another 70 on Zoom, and we have people just doing radio science and presenting it from all over the world. It's just fantastic. So what makes HamSCI work? I think maybe this is the most important slide in the whole talk. I think the first thing is really people who care. HamSCI is primarily a volunteer organization. There's a little money through the grants, and it supports the academics, but really it's not like what you'd make in industry. It's not like what you'd make in a lot of other people. All of HamSCI is done on goodwill. It's done on people who want to see things happen. It's done on people who are showing an interest and a passion. We cannot pay people enough to do the type of work that they're doing. So people care about what they're doing. People care about each other. We have fantastic mentors, people who've been doing this for years. I pair them up with my students who have just learned about ham radio last week, and they get on Zoom on a regular basis and they work on projects. The students bring so much energy to the program that we really need. I feel like the students help to give the mentors some purpose. So when we have people who have years of experience, when they're paired with the student, they now feel like they have more of a purpose, more of a reason why they're doing this. We try to connect people's interests and skills. If you come to me and say, how do I participate in HamSCI? The first thing I'll ask you is, well, what are your interests? And we try to figure that out. It requires a lot of persistence and passion. There's a lot of roadblocks, but we keep working on it. We figure out how to keep going. I like to listen to people, take advice, reflect on it, and I'm really grateful for all the opportunities that have been given to me and that have been given to us. So, including this one, Chip. Thank you very much. Thank you.